Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call a regular meeting of council to order, Monday, November 15th, 2021. Approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Norbury.
That the Monday, November 15th, 2021 regular meeting of council agenda be adopted as presented.
Seconder, Councillor Lehman. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes, November 1st, 2021 regular meeting of council minutes. Recommendation, please. Councillor Lehman.
That the Monday, November 1st, 2021 regular meeting of council minutes be adopted as presented.
Seconder, Councillor Kirby. Any errors or omissions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any business arising from the minutes, council?
None.
Thank you. And delegations and petitions. We have 6.1 Economic Pulse Analytics, Dr. Kyle Farrell, to report on the results of the housing needs assessment for Tumbler Ridge. I believe we have Kyle on Zoom here. Perfect. Hi, Kyle.
Great, nice to see everybody.
Good to see you too.
Thank you. Is it all right if I begin then?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Great, yes, so for those of you who don't remember me, my name is Kyle Farrell, and I'm a consultant for Economic Pulse Analytics, as the Mayor just mentioned. And today I wanted to present to you the findings of the housing needs assessment for the District of Tumbler Ridge. So I have a slight presentation prepared here where I'll share a little bit of information about how the report was compiled, as well as the key findings. But I also wanted to use this as an opportunity to clarify any questions that you guys might have around this. So everybody can see my screen all right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, and I've got this little laser pointer here, so hopefully you can see that as well to help me. But this slide just presents a brief overview of how the presentation is structured, just to help you guide you guys through it as well. I'm just going to begin by sharing some background information about the report. I'll talk a little bit about how the report was compiled. I'm going to highlight some of the key findings. This has more to do with some of the quantitative findings or the data-driven findings, because it's a very analytical report, I'll describe it as. I'll share some information about the projections, about where the population and where housing is going in Tumbler Ridge moving forward. I also wanted to highlight some of the key findings from the public consultation exercises, and then point to some considerations and recommendations at the end. And then we'll free up some time for questions at the end. So I'm going to try to keep everything to about 15 minutes, so bear with me. And if I'm moving too fast or anything like that, please just let me know, and I'm happy to slow down or return to a slide.
Certainly.
So, in general, what is a housing needs assessment? So again, this is key legislation on behalf of the provincial government that requires every municipality in BC to undergo a housing needs assessment and prepare a housing needs report by April of 2022. So you guys are a bit ahead of schedule, which is great. And then every municipality will be required to update this every 5 years thereafter. And the key requirements of this report include collecting and analyzing information on the housing situation of the community, preparing and publishing a housing needs report online, submitting the summary form to the provincial government, and ultimately incorporating the findings of the housing needs assessment into some of the key documents in the community, namely the official community plan. In terms of how it will benefit Tumbler Ridge, really this is a way for Tumbler Ridge to better understand their current and anticipated housing needs. It helps them to identify existing and projected gaps in the housing supply, and it also speaks to important housing indicators such as housing availability in the community, affordability, suitability, different indicators like that. And I'll get to further descriptions of each further on. And it also speaks to what the province calls key areas of local need. So this has to do with key issues related to housing, such as affordability, seniors housing, rental housing, family housing, and so on. So the report also speaks to those elements as well. In terms of how it was prepared, it really stands on three pillars. The first being a detailed review of policy. So this maps out key documents that influence and shape housing policy or shape housing issues in the community. And this is anything from federal housing policy to provincial housing policy, right down to the municipal. So there's many different layers to this. It also does a rigorous collection and analysis of more than 50 distinct indicators related to housing. So these are demographic, economic, and housing-specific indicators. And it also leans a lot on a heavy public consultation process. So this involved multiple workshops in the community. Most of you will recall I was up there in July alongside the official community plan team, and we conducted some workshops alongside each other and also put out a survey to the community. There was also an open house and individual interviews around that. So kind of a lot of different points of triangulation that inform this sort of document. This is just a little bit of an overview of the timeline. Again, I was in Tumbler Ridge undergoing the workshops and some of the interviews in July. July and August happened to be a lot more review of documents and analysis. And then we eventually had a first draft that was shared with the district staff and got some inputs from there. And then a final draft was prepared for October, and here we are now presenting. So in terms of the key findings, I guess the first thing I should note about this is a lot of it relies on data provided in the government census. And as you'll all know, the most recent census was 2016. We're currently undergoing one right now, but the results aren't available. So some of the data dates back to 2016, but we've also made an effort to kind of bring some of it up to date up to 2021. And the document's also quite forward-looking. So we also prepared some population projections to give us an understanding of how the population is expected to grow in Tumbler Ridge, as well as what their housing needs will be. So that's just a bit of a disclaimer there. But most of you will probably be familiar with the trajectory of Tumbler Ridge's population, undergoing a period of growth between 2006 to 2011, followed by a period of slight decline. And the current population sits at just under 2,000. In terms of the average age, it sits around 38. So this is slightly higher than the regional average in terms of age, which is 34. When we look at housing data, we see that the trajectory has followed quite a similar path, experiencing a period of growth between 2006 and 2011, followed by a period of decline. And there's currently about 860 households, again, as of 2016, in Tumbler Ridge, with an average household size of about 2.3 people per household, so slightly smaller than the regional average of 2.5. In terms of housing diversity, if you look at this blue pie chart on the left there, you'll see that the vast majority of the housing stock is single-family dwellings, about 76%. This is followed by about 13% of the housing stock being movable or mobile dwellings, and just under 10% representing apartments and row housing and whatnot. And the Peace River Regional District average is on the right there, showing a little bit less when it comes to single-family dwellings and a little bit more diversity in other housing types. In terms of construction, the vast majority of Tumbler Ridge's housing was constructed during the 1980s, about 80%, which is no surprise given its history as a planned community. Only about 2% of the housing stock has been built in the last 10 years or so. So it speaks a little bit to some of the challenges moving forwards in terms of upkeep and investment in housing. In terms of households and unit size, we see that about 66% of Tumbler Ridge's population is 1 to 2 person households. And then when we look at the housing stock, the diagram on the right, we see that the majority, about 82%, are 3 and 4 bedroom units. So this kind of suggests that there's a large number of individuals in housing that likely exceeds their capacity, which could speak to a few different things, one of which being the aging population, potentially. In terms of non-market housing, so this refers to housing that's subsidized either by the government or not-for-profit. There's about 34 non-market housing units in Tumbler Ridge. The majority of these being what are classified as independent social housing units. So this could be for elderly or affordable housing or whatnot. There's about 3 units for transitional, supported, and assisted living, and 1 for rent assistance in the private market. And just as a means of comparison, I put some other neighboring communities. So a larger community like Dawson Creek would have about 372 non-market units, Chetwynd about 51, and Taylor about 9. So between Chetwynd and Taylor, Tumbler Ridge sits somewhere in the middle there. This slide depicts what's called an affordability gap analysis. So really what it's doing is it's demonstrating the income that is at the disposal of different household groups when it comes to housing and the costs of housing in the community. So one thing to bring your attention to is the first column here, which speaks to the different household types. So we have couples with children, couples without children, lone parent census family, non-census family, and other census family. These are kind of how the census categorizes different groups. And based on this, we can kind of identify median annual incomes. And based on different indicators on behalf of the provincial government, they would suggest that anyone spending more than 30% of their income on housing is potentially in a vulnerable situation. So what this table here does, and particularly the colored cells here, what they show is whether a household type can afford different types of housing in the community. You'll see from the top line there, couple without children can afford each of these different household types, from single family dwellings to apartments to movable dwellings. That's why they're green. They can quite comfortably afford them. The only one that's in a little bit of a vulnerable situation in terms of affordability of ownership is the lone parent census family. And they tend to have much lower incomes than other household types in the community. And based on this analysis, it would suggest that single family dwellings is slightly outside of their reach for affordability when it comes to ownership. Yet alternatives such as apartments and movable dwellings are very much affordable in Tumbler Ridge for this household type. When we move to affordability gap analysis for rental households, it gets a little bit more challenging. Again, we see the household types on the left there, and we can see what they can afford on the right here. Unfortunately, the data is not available to show the different household types, but it is available to see the number of bedrooms or the size of housing that one can afford. And we can see that couples without children and couples with children, as well as the other census family category, can all comfortably afford the 3 different housing types, the 1-bedroom units, the 2-bedroom units, the 3-bedroom units. However, when it comes to lone parent census families and non-census families, again, these are more lower income groups in the community. There's more of a challenge around this. So to afford 1-bedroom and 2 bedrooms, they would have to spend more than 30% of their income. That's what the yellow means. And to afford a 3-bedroom unit, they would have to spend more than 50% of their unit or their income. And again, based on government definitions, this would consider them to be in a slightly vulnerable situation when it comes to housing affordability. Other housing indicators that the housing needs report looks at have to do with housing standards. So the 3 areas that they're most interested in is the housing adequacy, which refers to whether or not a major repair is needed. This could be anything from plumbing to electrical to roof work. Another one being housing affordability, which refers to whether one has to spend more than 30% of their before-tax household income on housing, similar to what we talked about on the last slide. And then suitability refers to whether there are enough bedrooms for the size and the makeup of residents. So depending on the size of the family living there, is there enough buildings or bedrooms for that? And when we look at this for Tumbler Ridge, we see that approximately 7% of households fall short when it comes to adequacy standards, 16% fall short when it comes to affordability standards, and 2% fall short when it comes to suitability standards. And compared to the regional average, We can see that it's affordability. There's a slight higher in Tumbler Ridge. Otherwise, they're lower in the other categories. This, when you disaggregate this or break this up among owners and renters, we again see the vulnerability around renters. Again, when it comes to adequacy, affordability, and suitability, it's always more of a challenge for a renter household than it is for an owner household. Another key area that the report looks at is what is deemed core housing need. So a household that fails to meet one of the housing standards indicators I mentioned above, adequacy, affordability, and suitability, would have to spend more than 30% of their income to find an alternative, would be considered to be in core housing need. And if they have to spend more than 50% of their household income, they'd be considered to be in extreme core housing need. And when we look at the data for Tumbler Ridge, we can see that 16% of households were in core housing need in the district of Tumbler Ridge, and 5% in extreme core housing need, slightly more than the regional average. And again, just as a means of comparison, this is again felt a little bit heavier among renter households than among owner households, as you can see by the diagram below. Looking forward, part of the housing needs assessment is to look at anticipated housing needs as well, so looking forward. And based on the projections that we prepared for Tumbler Ridge, it's expected that Tumbler Ridge's population will grow from 2,186 in 2021 to 2,335 in 2028. So this is an additional 149 individuals. The majority of this growth will also, actually I wouldn't say the majority of this growth. The growth is going to be pretty stable among most age cohorts, but it's going to be felt a little bit more among the elderly age cohorts. So they're going to be growing a little bit faster. So we can expect Tumbler Ridge's population to age slightly as well, going from an age of about 40 to an age of about 41, an average age over that 7-year time horizon. What that means in terms of housing is that there's going to be a demand for an additional 93 units in the community based on these projections. You can see from this diagram here how it's broken up over the years. So out of the 93 units, the majority of them, based on similar household structure today, will require single detached housing. This will be followed by mobile homes, and then only a few requiring apartments and row housing. Again, these are based on assumptions that the housing stock will stay similar to the current structure today. And then average household size will decline slightly from 2.3 to 2.2. And this is fairly consistent with any aging population as well.
Excuse me, Kyle, I need to interrupt here for a moment. Motion.
Yes, of course.
Motion to continue the delegation. Seconder, Councillor Lehman. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Go ahead, Kyle, thank you.
No problem at all. Just moving ahead, so the last picture I just painted for you is very much an analytical, quantitative look at the data, but I don't think it tells the whole story about Tumbler Ridge as a community or about housing in Tumbler Ridge. So it's also important that this report focuses on the personal testimonies we heard as well. And we heard a lot through multiple workshops in the community. We heard it through the open house. We also heard it through a survey that was given to the community, and we got quite a good response rate from the survey as well. So the next part is just a summary of some of the key things that we heard from the community in these areas as well. So in general, just beginning with some of the opportunities, I think it will be no surprise to you to hear that one of the key assets of Tumbler Ridge is really where it's pivoting towards as a lifestyle community. So it's starting to really build a reputation as this desirable place to live in terms of its vast wilderness, its access to the outdoors, its recreational activities such as hiking, ATVing, and whatnot. We also heard a lot about the affordability of the community. In many instances, the quantitative data that I shared with you before paints a picture of mixed housing affordability in the community based on different household types, but it was also widely expressed that housing, when compared to other parts of the province, is quite affordable in Tumbler Ridge. So that's quite important to realize as well. When you look outside of the community and you look at the price of housing in the community, you can see that it is quite competitive from a province-wide perspective. In terms of expansion, I think everybody would agree that Tumbler Ridge is very much primed for expansion. Being built as a planned community that was designed for a population of 5,000. Currently, its population is less than half that, so there's lots of opportunity to grow. Also, a lot of people highlighted the advantage points in terms of it growing as a tourist destination. So I think the global geo part speaks to that. Also, the stories I heard about the Game of Thrones activities over the past few years, and really the recreational assets that are around Tumbler Ridge. A lot of people highlighted the benefit of Tumbler Ridge being a do-it-yourself tourism community as well. Another prevalent opportunity that people saw in the community is really seeing it as a remote work destination. And I think having looked at how things have been going over the last year with COVID-19, I feel like that's an area that communities are really going to latch onto and leverage. And it sounded like, based on the testimonies we heard from the community, that Tumbler Ridge is really well suited for that. And I know there's investment going into that area as well in terms of improving internet connectivity and whatnot as well. It was also highlighted that there's also opportunities for rural residential acreages. It was well noted that people are looking for larger lot sizes in the community to store the recreational toys, but also room for a garage and other features. And it seems like the district is exploring these opportunities to offer that to the community. So there was a lot of praise around that as well. That being said, there were also some challenges that were highlighted in the public consultation processes. One of the more prevalent ones was the limited health care and the risk of being placed on diversion being a challenge, especially when it comes to aging in place for some of the seniors in the community. It was also noted that there is a lack of rentals, and there were some mentions about the prices of rentals in the community, so a challenge being there. I think it's no surprise, again, with the aging housing stock, knowing that the majority of the housing was built in the 1980s, that there will be some requirements in terms of investments. One of the challenges that was noted was that there's not necessarily a guarantee if one invests in upgrading their home that they'll be able to get that return in terms of housing prices on the open market. Another area was the lack of housing diversity. So again, ensuring that there's housing for the different groups and the different needs and requirements of the community was something else that we heard. Smaller lot sizes was also noted as a hindrance in the community, especially when it comes to storing of recreational toys and also having access to garages. There was several mentions as well of the lack of non-market housing in the community. So again, government provided housing, such as assisted living, such as elderly facilities, housing for mental health, and these sorts of things. And then finally, the challenges of aging in place. So really just people mentioning that when they bought their house, it was perfect for them, but now that they're getting a little bit older or having different requirements at different ages in life, they require different housing types. So just reflecting on that as well. Just looking forward, and I'm not going to go too much into this, but just wanting to highlight, I would say, more considerations than recommendations about how to overcome some of these obstacles and how to address some of the housing needs in the community moving forward. The first recommendation is just based on the findings of this report, the District of Tumbler Ridge should assemble a housing task force to lead in the preparation of developing a housing strategy that is forward-looking and action-oriented. This is really underscoring the fact that this study here is a housing needs assessment. and more of an analytical assessment as opposed to a strategy, and that there is a need for a vision and a strategic direction for us in the community, and there could be a good opportunity for the District of Tumbler Ridge to piggyback off of this assessment and really to provide that strategic direction moving forward. Another recommendation came around securing that the findings from this study inform the strategic and regulatory documents in the community. And I'd say you guys have already taken a big jump in this direction, because there were major efforts made early on in this process to ensure that the housing needs assessment aligned with the upgrading and updating of the official community plan. So I have been working quite closely with the consultants from WSP, Chen and Gabrielle, to ensure that the findings of this study help to inform the official community plan as well. But there will be other opportunities to ensure that other documents, especially policy and strategy documents in the community, also incorporate the findings from a housing perspective as well. Recommendation 3 is to prepare an inventory or a database of housing and land availability, including rental units, and explore how to bring the underutilized supply of housing onto the open market. So again, there is going to be a demand for housing in the future. And instead of immediately turning to new build housing, there might be an opportunity to explore what already exists and how to optimize the current system, how to bring some of the perhaps dormant housing onto the open market and explore that. And inventory would be a good starting point for that. Recommendation 4, to explore housing-related organizations to learn more about the key issues that they're working with and the services and the resources that they provide, with the aim of identifying opportunities for collaboration. So again, there's lots of different organizations working with housing needs in Canada, and particularly in BC. BC Housing, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and there's lots of resources made available to really exploring what they have to offer and how these can be tapped into to improve the housing situation in Tumbler Ridge. To educate and inform the public about opportunities to access resources such as rental assistance, shelter aid, home adaptation grants, and so on, and potentially to offer services to help them prepare these. So there's also a lot of resources available out there for the individual to apply for, but it's not always the case that the individuals are aware of this. And based on some of the stuff that I heard from the conversations I had in Tumbler Ridge, a lot of people have opportunities to upgrade or renovate their house to better suit their needs, but accessing resources may be a challenge. So there could be an opportunity to educate the public on where they might turn to in these sorts of areas. Recommendation 6, to explore the potential of preparing universal design guidelines to help the public take independent action in retrofitting their homes to meet their needs. So mainly for seniors is this point. So again, providing resources, and I think you guys have already made efforts in this direction by the former study you did on seniors housing to really identify what are the barriers and how people in the community can overcome these to retrofit their houses in a way that better suits their needs. Recommendation 7, to explore the range of grants and subsidies that are available to support vulnerable groups in society. So again, I think this report provides a lot of data and information that can help the district build more of a compelling case around some of the more vulnerable groups in the community in hopes of uncovering or accessing resources that might be able to help them in terms of housing support. And finally, and this is more of an ambitious and perhaps further down the road recommendation, but really to explore the idea of establishing a housing support fund that can provide finance to support the goals of the community. And this should align with the housing vision for the community as well. So there's a few different communities throughout BC that have explored this idea, setting up a fund that they can have access to support some of the goals. And this can be financed potentially through provincial funding, but also through creative opportunities in the community, such as sale of municipal land and whatnot. So I know this was a speed speed overview of the presentations and the findings, but I'm sure you guys have had a chance to go through them yourselves, so I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you'd like me to go back to any of the slides, I'd be happy to do so as well. So over to council.
Appreciate Kyle, thank you very much. Council, any questions, comments? Councillor Norbury?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. Thank you for the presentation. I only had one question at the moment about the independent social housing. You mentioned that there were 30-ish units. Is that from 2016 or is that current?
That's a very good question. I'm just going to double check with the board here just so I can confirm. I believe that's more up to date data, but let me just confirm that. Non-market housing, page 44. This is 2020 data from BC Housing.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments, council? I really appreciated all the statistics and data. I'm a numbers guy, so I certainly appreciated all that, and a lot of it was quite news to me. It was shocking in some aspects, but I thought it was a very good report, Kyle, and a lot of good information in it, and the recommendations or the considerations are certainly items to consider for every community, I think. So definitely appreciate your time this evening, and thank you very much for everything you've done on the assessment.
That's my pleasure, Mayor Bertrand and council. I really enjoyed working with the District of Tumbler Ridge on this. I really walked away from my visit with a very positive outlook towards the future for the community. So I feel like you guys are on a really good track. So I really hope that the findings from this housing needs assessment can aid you in that. And I think some of the discussions I had with the district as well about some of the upcoming plans for the community, I think a lot of the data can be utilized from this report to help support the direction of that, to help build compelling cases to get to move the community forward.
Absolutely, I agree. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Thank you very much, everybody. My pleasure, and all the best.
You as well. Stay safe. All right, moving on to consent agenda. Recommendation, please. Councillor Norbury.
That all items in the Monday, November 15th, 2021 consent agenda be moved for information.
Seconder. Councillor Kirby. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Any items council would like to lift from the consent agenda? Okay. Moving on to new business. Childcare BC New Spaces Fund, 9.1. Report dated November 15th from the Chief Administrative Officer. Council funding required for application to the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund. Recommendation, please. Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. I'll move that staff apply for the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund to assist with the capital cost of a 70-space standalone childcare facility, and that the district commit to capital funding of 32 existing spaces as well as any cost overruns of the project.
Seconder. Councillor Norbury. Discussion. Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. I'll have to repeat kind of a little bit what we've talked about in the past, but I think it's important to highlight why we're still passionate, why I'm still passionate about this project moving forward. So much of our community needs quality childcare, and we've tried this many times. We need to ensure that we have spaces as well as quality care. I'm in full support.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. This is certainly a pillar for our community to try to attract and retain people to come to our community, and I just have a question for staff, Ms. Thompson. We are licensed for 32 existing spaces. Do you know how many are filled currently and how many are on waiting list?
Thank you, Member Trent, Council. So you are, as far as I am aware at this time, we have 8 spaces that we are currently using full-time. There are 16 spaces that are used for preschool, and on the preschool list, there are 16 children that are currently on a wait list as well. I know that there's another number on a wait list of the older children, but I honestly cannot remember what that is at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Carried, thank you. 9.2, Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. I need to recuse myself as I have a monetary interest in the library.
Yep, thank you.
We don't have quorum.
So we have to defer this then, correct? So
That's it.
Yeah. Are you,
am I able to make the motion to defer with just the 3 of us here? It just automatically is deferred,
yeah.
correct? Okay, thank you. Okay, 9.3, 2021 COVID-19 Restart Grant Allocation Update. Report dated November 18th, 2021 from the Chief Financial Officer with the 2021 COVID-19 Restart Grant Allocation Update. I'd like to move this for discussion. Seconder, Councillor Kirby. All in favor? Carried, thank you. The report is pretty well done and self-explanatory, but I'm wondering, Ms. Thompson, if staff would like an opportunity to present it.
Thank you, Member Trent. So as I can respond a little bit to the report as well, and if there are any additional questions, then I'll have Ms. Haggerty respond as well. So this is the second report that we have brought to council on the COVID funding that we have received of the $827,000. So we are showing that there are, where we have our losses in income, what an explanation of council and what our eligible costs are including. So we are just letting council know what we've been able to allocate to that grant funding at this time. So on the last page of the report, with our projections, we will have $140,934 that we carried over into 2022.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Council? Councillor Norbury?
I'll make the second recommendation that council approve the allocation of $57,890.09 from the COVID-19 Restart Grant Reserve for the audio-visual upgrades to council chambers capital project.
Seconder, Councillor Kirby, discussion? Councillor Lehman?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going over the report. We're not sure yet if it's going to be, allowed for this restart,
This expense, you mean?
this expense?
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. It should be allowed because under eligible costs, it is computer and other electronic technology costs. So we have to send it in and get approval from the province for it. So we're assuming it will be. And that's why we're just getting council's approval for that as well.
Okay. Councillor Norbury?
To add on that, one of the eligible costs is services to vulnerable persons. This will improve the ability for people to, observe and monitor our council meetings at home. Probably squeak it in there.
If they have the technological capability, yes. Okay. Any other comments, questions? All in favor? Carried, thank you. 9.4, Community Center Snow Ice Guards. Report dated November 15th, 2021 from the Director of Operations and Infrastructure regarding the Community Center Snow and Ice Guards. Recommendation, please. Councillor Lehman.
That council approve the installation of ice and snow guards at the community center through operational funding.
Seconder. Councillor Kirby, discussion. Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand. I did have a question about how long these ice and snow guards are, how long they will last, and if they are of similar style to what was being used on the community center, like the square, the pyramids, I suppose.
Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Bertrand, to council. So they are a permanent fixture that will go on, and there will be heat tape installed in them. I don't believe that they are the pyramid type ones, that they're flatter, I guess more triangular, and just a little bit of length on them from what I do understand.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think this is a better idea than roping off the whole front of the rec center and having people walk on the road. I think this is a better solution.
Absolutely. Any other comments, questions? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Schedule of meetings. Any issues there, council? Staff?
None.
Thank you. Any notice of motions this evening? Any councilor's business? Any councilor's business? Okay. I had a Resource Municipalities Coalition meeting this week, as well as environmental social governance workshop with the coalition. It was very informative, and I sent out the slide deck to council there for their review. It's kind of an overarching way of looking at ESG, I guess, and decisions moving forward. I was on a old growth conference call with Ministry of Flinro, talking about the old growth strategy and how they're going to implement the recommendations, 14 recommendations, as well as a Peace River Regional District meeting, as again this week on Thursday. The previous one, council is going to be seeing options for a regional economic development model. We've been going through exercise to try and figure out what kind of economic development model will work within the regional district. As you know, the previous one has not been supported by the letters of patent, so we've had to try to reinvent it if it's even a priority for the regional district. At this time, there doesn't appear to be a front runner, so there was a suggestion at the board table to send all of the information and options to each council of the municipalities for input and feedback, and where they feel the economic development function of the regional district could go. And if there's any of those options that council would like to comment on, it's very much welcomed. Yeah, that's about it for me. Ms. Thompson, any questions this evening?
I have none.
Okay, thank you. And resolution to closed. I'll move that the meeting of the District of Tumbler Ridge Council scheduled for September 8th. That is not correct. November 15th, 2021 will be closed pursuant to the Community Charter provisions, section 91 C, E, and J. Is that still correct, Ms. Thompson? Thank you. C is labor relations or other employee relations. E is the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. And J, information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Seconder, Councillor Lehman. All in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. 10-minute recess, please. I didn't see it.
I didn't pay attention, and it's 2009.